The day Sophie received the eviction notice was a day that felt ordinary at first. The sun poured softly through the sheer curtains of her small apartment, painting golden streaks across the worn wooden floor. She had just returned from her morning shift at the diner, her arms heavy with the routine of life, coffee, toast, the constant hum of work and bills. Life she had thought was predictable, at least predictable enough to navigate without panic, but the envelope in her mailbox suggested otherwise. Her hands trembled slightly as she held the letter, the official seal mocking her. Eviction notice, immediate compliance required. Her eyes darted across the text, trying to make sense of the demand. The landlord's name was familiar, Mr. Caldwell, but there was something oddly intimate about the way the notice was worded. It wasn't the cold legal language she had expected, it was personal, almost knowing. It addressed her by her first name, Sophie, and ended with a peculiar line. "Your brother has spoken, you must leave." Sophie froze. Brother? She didn't have a brother. Her only living relatives were her mother, long gone, and distant cousins she rarely spoke to. Her mind spun. Was this some sort of cruel mistake, or had someone forged a claim just to scare her? Panic clawed at her chest, but she forced herself to think clearly. She would call Mr. Caldwell. There had to be a simple explanation. The line on the phone crackled before he answered, his voice smooth, confident, disarmingly casual. "Ah, Sophie, I was wondering when you'd call." "Your notice about my brother?" Sophie's voice was sharp disbelief dripping from every syllable. "I don't have a brother, what is this about?" There was a pause on the other end. When he spoke, it was almost gentle, like he was trying to coax her into understanding something she wasn't ready for. "Sophie, you've lived here for years, I've seen you struggle and I want to help, but your brother, he's requested you leave, you know it's for the best, I'm just carrying out his wishes." Sophie's stomach dropped. "My brother, I don't even know what you're talking about." "You'll see soon enough, just pack your things, it'll be easier on both of us." The line went dead before she could respond. Heart pounding, Sophie sank into her couch. Who could be claiming to be her brother, and why was her landlord using that as leverage to evict her? Fear mixed with anger, a cocktail that made her feel trapped in a nightmare she hadn't signed up for. Over the next few days, Mr. Caldwell's presence became almost omnipresent. He appeared at her door with a polite smile and a gentle insistence, always talking about family obligations and what her brother wanted. His words were soft, persuasive, but each encounter left Sophie feeling smaller, more unsettled. Friends she confided in tried to calm her. "Maybe it's just a misunderstanding," her coworker Jenna suggested, pouring her another cup of coffee. "People do weird things sometimes, don't take it personally." But Sophie couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to it, something dark and personal. She began to notice inconsistencies, small things that didn't add up. Mr. Caldwell always knew exactly when she would be home. Letters, supposedly from her brother, appeared at her doorstep with unnerving frequency, and each note was filled with intimate details about her life, things only someone very close to her could know. Her instincts screamed at her that she was being manipulated, and yet who could orchestrate something so bizarre? The thought of a brother she didn't have seemed impossible, yet the tension in the air was undeniable. Sophie needed answers. Late one night she sat at her kitchen table, the soft hum of the refrigerator the only sound breaking the silence. She spread out every letter, every note, every detail she could find. She traced the postmarks, scrutinized the handwriting, searched for anything that could reveal the truth. And then she found it, a faint, almost imperceptible watermark on one of the letters. A symbol she recognized, the same logo from Mr. Caldwell's business card. Her heart sank. It wasn't her brother sending these letters, it was him. Sophie felt a mix of relief and horror. Relief because at least her mind wasn't betraying her with hallucinations or confusion. Horror because the person she trusted, or at least the person who had the power to make her life so difficult, was deliberately creating a lie, a fake family member to scare her out of her home. Determined not to be intimidated, Sophie decided to confront Mr. Caldwell directly. She needed evidence, something concrete, something undeniable. She remembered a flyer from a local law firm about legal rights for tenants. With trembling hands, she grabbed her phone and booked a consultation for the next day. But Mr. Caldwell was not one to back down easily. The following morning, she opened her door to find him standing there, a friendly, almost too sincere smile plastered on his face. "Sophie," he said, voice dripping with familiarity, "I thought we might talk, as family." She froze. The casual use of the word family made her blood run cold. It was a word that should mean trust, safety, comfort, but coming from him, it was a weapon. "You've made a lot of mistakes, Sophie," he continued, stepping closer. "Your brother only wants what's best for you, you'll understand when it's too late." Sophie's hands shook as she clutched the edge of the doorframe. This man, this landlord, was a master manipulator. He had constructed a web of lies so intricate that it ensnared her completely. Every letter, every note, every encounter had been calculated, designed to break her resolve. And yet, amid the fear, a spark of defiance ignited. Sophie realized that he had underestimated her. He thought she would be intimidated, scared into leaving, but she had a plan. If he wanted a fight, he was about to get one. She stepped outside, meeting his gaze squarely. "You don't have a brother," she said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "It's you're pretending, and I'm not leaving until this is resolved properly." Mr. Caldwell's smile faltered for just a fraction of a second before he masked it with amusement. "Oh, Sophie, you think you're clever, let's see how clever you really are." That night, Sophie stayed awake, drafting emails, documenting every interaction, every letter, every suspicious behavior. She knew she had to be meticulous. One wrong move, one overlooked detail, and he could twist the story again, make her seem irrational, unstable. And then the idea came to her, the thing that could expose him completely. DNA. If he was pretending to be her brother, a simple test could prove the lie. It seemed almost too perfect, too simple, and yet terrifying. What if he fought back? What if he tried to sabotage the test? But the more she thought about it, the more she realized that this was her best chance. The next morning, she called the lab, explaining her situation without revealing too much. She arranged for a discreet DNA collection, making sure every precaution was taken to prevent tampering. Then came the waiting. Every knock at the door, every shadow in the hallway felt like a threat. Every day, Mr. Caldwell appeared more charming, more insistent, trying to maintain the illusion of control. Sophie felt the weight of the coming confrontation pressing on her, a storm gathering on the horizon. She knew that once the truth came out, nothing would ever be the same. And deep down, she knew that she wasn't just fighting for her apartment, she was fighting for her dignity, for her sanity, and for the chance to expose the shocking lengths someone could go to manipulate another person. And as she stared out the window that evening, watching the sun dip below the rooftops, she whispered to herself, "This ends soon, one way or another." Little did she know, the next few days would unravel a chain of deception so twisted, so shocking, that it would change her life forever, and reveal a truth that no one, not even Sophie, could have anticipated. The shadow of the man she once called her landlord was long and his lies were deep, but Sophie had discovered the first crack in his facade, and once that crack widened there would be no turning back. Her heart raced with anticipation and fear. The game had begun and Sophie was ready to play. Sophie's fingers froze on the phone as the voice faded, leaving her staring into the darkness of her apartment. Whoever it was, they knew something. Someone had been watching, tracking every move she made. Fear gripped her, but beneath it, a fiery determination took root. She couldn't let Mr. Caldwell's web of lies suffocate her. Not now, not ever. The next morning, she made her way to the DNA testing lab. Her heart pounded with each step, each footfall on the cracked sidewalk echoing like a drumbeat of fate. The lab was tucked away in a quiet corner of the city, unassuming yet precise, like a safe haven where truths could be uncovered and lies dissected. She checked in, explaining the situation in minimal detail, careful not to give away Mr. Caldwell's manipulative games to the staff. She handed over the samples with trembling hands, 2 swabs, one labeled for brother and one for herself, and was told results would take a few days. As she left the lab, Sophie's mind raced. Each step back to her apartment felt like walking through a minefield. She replayed every encounter with Mr. Caldwell, every subtle threat hidden behind smiles and gentle words. His manipulation was a masterclass in psychological control. Letters claiming to be from a brother she didn't have, hints that her family wanted her gone, the constant suggestion that resistance was futile. She had been terrified, cornered, but now she had a weapon. At the apartment, Mr. Caldwell was waiting. He appeared casually in the doorway as if he belonged there, leaning slightly against the frame with that same unsettling calmness. "Good morning, Sophie," he said smoothly, his smile warm but too practiced, like a mask hiding a darker truth. "You seem tense." Sophie forced a calm she didn't feel. "I'm handling things," she replied, keeping her voice steady. "You won't intimidate me anymore." He chuckled softly, the sound unsettling in its casual confidence. "Intimidate? Oh, Sophie, you don't even know what you're capable of, but I admire your spirit. It reminds me of someone." He paused, eyes glinting. "Your brother, perhaps." Sophie's jaw tightened. That word again, brother, it had become a weapon in his hands, a shadow hanging over every conversation. "I know it's you," she said quietly but firmly. "All of it. The letters, the notices, the lies. You think you can scare me out of my home by pretending to be family, but I'm not afraid anymore." Mr. Caldwell's eyes flickered just for a moment. A hint of something she couldn't name, maybe frustration, maybe admiration, maybe anger, flashed across his face before the familiar calm returned. Bold words, Sophie, bold words indeed. He stepped aside, letting her pass into her apartment. We'll see how long your courage lasts. Over the next day, Sophie prepared. She collected every letter, every piece of evidence, every strange pattern she had noticed. She documented it meticulously, photographing envelopes, saving texts, even tracking the time of his visits. Each piece of evidence felt like a small victory, a step toward reclaiming control. And all the while, a low hum of fear and anticipation ran beneath her confidence. Mr. Caldwell was dangerous, and she knew it. Then came the call from the lab. The voice on the line was clinical, detached, almost too calm. The DNA results are ready, the technician said. Sophie held her breath as they walked her through the protocol for viewing them. Her hands shook as she accessed the secured portal, her eyes scanning the data. And there it was. The results were clear, undeniable. The sample labeled as her brother did not match hers in any familial way, not even remotely. A chill ran down her spine. The truth finally lay before her in black and white. Mr. Caldwell was lying. He had created a false brother, fabricated a family connection, all to manipulate and control her. A strange mix of relief and rage coursed through her. Relief because the evidence was undeniable, rage because the extent of his deception was staggering. He had gone to incredible lengths, invading her life, constructing an elaborate illusion, all to force her out of the apartment. And now, she held the key to exposing him. But there was no time to celebrate. She knew he would react if he discovered she had tested the DNA. The stakes were higher than ever. That evening, Sophie returned to her apartment to find a single envelope on her doorstep. Her name was scrawled across it in familiar handwriting, Mr. Caldwell's handwriting. Her heart raced as she tore it open. Inside was a simple note. Curiosity can be dangerous, Sophie. Be careful what you uncover. Some truths are better left buried. The warning did nothing to intimidate her now, it only strengthened her resolve. Whoever he thought he was protecting with his lies, she was no longer afraid. The game had changed. That night she reviewed every encounter with him in her mind. Every subtle threat, every false promise, every manipulation. It was clear now that he was not just a landlord, he was a master manipulator, a man who thrived on control and fear. But Sophie had something he didn't: truth. And truth, she realized, could be more powerful than any deception. The next day, Sophie decided to confront him directly but carefully. She documented her apartment, ensuring hidden cameras were in place, recording devices discreetly positioned. Every interaction would be captured, every lie documented. This was no longer just about staying in her home. This was about exposing a dangerous man who had crossed every line imaginable. When Mr. Caldwell arrived that afternoon, he seemed confident, even amused. "Ah, Sophie," he said, leaning against the doorframe with that same unsettling calm. "I see you've been busy." "I have," Sophie replied, keeping her tone measured, "and I've learned something important." He raised an eyebrow, curiosity flickering across his face. "Oh, and what might that be?" Sophie took a deep breath. "You don't have a brother, none of it is true. You fabricated the entire story to scare me, to force me out." For a moment, he said nothing. His smile remained, but it was slightly strained, a flicker of unease breaking through. "That's a serious accusation, Sophie," he said, his tone smooth but careful. "I have proof," she said, pulling out her phone and showing him the DNA results. "This test proves you're lying. You've been manipulating me, lying about family, using fear to control me, and it ends now." The change in his demeanor was subtle but undeniable. The practiced calm faltered. "Interesting," he said, voice tight, "very interesting." Sophie stepped forward, her resolve unshakable. "You underestimated me. You thought fear could force me to leave, but I'm not leaving, not until you face the consequences of what you've done." For the first time, Mr. Caldwell's eyes betrayed a flicker of panic, his lips pressed into a thin line as he considered her words. "You're clever," he admitted, voice low, "cleverer than I anticipated." Sophie didn't back down. "Clever enough to expose you, and I will." He studied her for a long moment, then nodded slightly, almost reluctantly. "Very well," he said. "Perhaps it's time the truth comes out, but remember, Sophie, truth has a way of cutting deeper than lies." That night, Sophie prepared herself for the confrontation that was coming. She knew the battle was far from over. Mr. Caldwell was a man accustomed to control, accustomed to manipulation, and he would not go quietly. But she had something he could not match, the irrefutable truth. As she lay awake, listening to the quiet of the apartment, Sophie knew one thing with absolute clarity: the next encounter would determine everything. The lies, the fear, the manipulation, it was all about to collide with reality. And when it did, no one would emerge unchanged. Sophie froze at the doorway, her heart hammering as she stared at the message scrawled across her wall. The words were aggressive yet calculated, deliberate intimidation designed to make her doubt herself. But instead of fear, a surge of clarity coursed through her veins. This was no longer about intimidation, it was about exposure. Every threat, every lie, every fabricated letter from a fake brother had led to this moment. Now she held the power. Her first step was to document everything. She took photos, recorded videos, even traced the handwriting against the letters Mr. Caldwell had sent. Each stroke, each curve, each dot of ink pointed back to him. There was no escaping it. The man who had manipulated her life for months had left a breadcrumb trail that would become his undoing. That evening, she decided to confront him face to face. But Sophie wasn't reckless. She called her lawyer, explaining the escalation and arranging for legal oversight. She didn't want a fight. She wanted proof, accountability, and the leverage to end the nightmare without putting herself at physical risk. When Mr. Caldwell arrived at the apartment later that evening, his usual confident mask was intact, but Sophie noticed subtle changes: his gait slightly rigid, his eyes scanning the room more frequently. He spoke before she could, voice light, almost jovial. "Sophie, I see you've been busy, trying to keep up with my games, I suppose." Sophie held his gaze, unflinching. "Games," she repeated. "You call fabricating a family member, threatening me, and invading my home a game?" He chuckled softly, but the edge in his tone betrayed a tension she hadn't seen before. "A game, yes, perhaps. Life itself is a game, don't you agree? You make moves, I make moves, it's simply strategy." Sophie stepped closer, producing her phone. "And sometimes the strategy backfires. Look at this." She showed him the DNA results once more, pointing to the undeniable proof that he was lying. "There is no brother, none of it is real, your control ends here." For a fraction of a second, his face hardened, a flash of true anger flickering across his features before being masked again. "Bold," he said slowly, "very bold of you. I expected compliance, fear, hesitation, but not this." "I'm done being scared," Sophie said firmly. "Done being manipulated. You've spent months constructing a lie to make me feel powerless, to force me out of my home. It ends now. Either we resolve this legally or you face the consequences of your actions." A tense silence filled the room. The air seemed heavier, every sound exaggerated: the hum of the fridge, the distant traffic, even Sophie's own breathing. Then he smiled, slow and deliberate, but it was different this time, less a mask, more a warning. "You've changed the rules, Sophie, you've become dangerous." She didn't flinch. "I'm just demanding truth, and I have proof." His eyes flickered toward the message on the wall, then back to her. "Clever girl," he murmured, "but cleverness has its cost." The following hours were a psychological battlefield. Mr. Caldwell tried every tactic: charm, guilt, manipulation, but Sophie remained resolute. She refused to engage in arguments about his fabricated family, refusing to let him twist words to unsettle her. Every attempt he made to undermine her confidence failed because the DNA results were absolute. By midnight, Mr. Caldwell's usual calm had cracked. He leaned back in a chair, hands clasped, staring at her with a mix of frustration and reluctant admiration. "I didn't anticipate that you'd take it this far," he admitted quietly. "Most people, they bend, they flee." Sophie's eyes narrowed. "You underestimated me." "Yes," he said softly, almost to himself, "and now we're at a crossroads." It was then that Sophie realized just how far his deception went. Every letter, every fabricated encounter, every veiled threat had been designed to isolate her, to make her question her own reality. He wasn't just a landlord with a vendetta, he was a manipulator who thrived on control, on fear. And for the first time, she understood the scale of what she had uncovered. The next morning, Sophie took further steps. She contacted the authorities, sharing her evidence, letters, and the DNA results. The response was swift. The police expressed concern over harassment and potential fraud. She also contacted her lawyer, who advised her on steps to secure her apartment legally while pursuing a case against Mr. Caldwell. Yet despite legal measures, Sophie couldn't shake the psychological tension. Every shadow, every knock, every unexpected sound in her apartment set her nerves on edge. Mr. Caldwell had proven clever, resourceful, and dangerous. She knew he would not give up easily. Then the call came, a calm, unfamiliar voice on the line. "You're careful, clever, but beware he won't go quietly." Sophie's stomach sank. She had expected resistance, but the reminder that the web of manipulation extended beyond her imagination made the stakes clear. This wasn't just about an eviction, it was about a man who believed he could rewrite reality to suit himself. Days passed with mounting tension. Sophie fortified her apartment, documented every interaction, and prepared for the next confrontation. Mr. Caldwell became increasingly erratic, appearing unannounced, leaving cryptic messages and testing her resolve. It was a psychological chess game, each move calculated, each counter measured. Finally, the breaking point arrived. Mr. Caldwell showed up at her door with a formal document, attempting one last manipulative ploy, a forged legal claim asserting that he was indeed her sibling under a convoluted family law loophole. Sophie calmly presented the DNA results to the authorities on the scene. The officers examined the documents, compared them with the evidence, and confirmed that Mr. Caldwell had fabricated the claim entirely. Cornered, Mr. Caldwell's composure finally crumbled. The man who had projected calm, control, and authority for months now stumbled under the weight of irrefutable proof. He had relied on fear and deception, but Sophie had wielded truth as a weapon, and it was devastatingly effective. Sophie watched, a mixture of vindication and disbelief running through her, as Mr. Caldwell was escorted out by the authorities. She had survived manipulation, intimidation, and the psychological games he had played. And now, for the first time in months, she felt a sense of liberation, though tinged with the knowledge that the scars of fear would take longer to heal. Sophie stared at the message on her phone, her heart skipping a beat. "He's gone, but not all secrets have been revealed. Are you ready for the truth?" The words seemed to pulse with danger and mystery. Even though Mr. Caldwell had been removed by the authorities, the message suggested that the story was far from over. Something deeper, something darker, was waiting beneath the surface. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. Fear lingered in the pit of her stomach, but determination burned brighter. Months of manipulation, lies, and psychological torment had hardened her resolve. She had survived a man who had constructed an entire false family to control her life, and she would survive whatever came next. The message led her to a small, nondescript cafe on the outskirts of town. The instructions were precise: arrive alone, leave the phone on the table, and wait. Sophie obeyed, every step deliberate, every glance cautious. She scanned the cafe as she entered. Patrons were engrossed in their own lives, unaware of the storm that was about to unfold in their midst. A figure emerged from the back, moving with a calm but purposeful grace. It was a woman in her 40s, wearing glasses that reflected the soft afternoon light. She smiled faintly at Sophie, gesturing for her to sit. "You must be Sophie," the woman said. Her voice was steady, measured, and surprisingly kind. "I've been expecting you." Sophie nodded cautiously. "Who are you? How do you know about this?" "My name is Margaret," the woman replied, settling across from her. "I've been involved in monitoring certain situations for a long time. Mr. Caldwell's manipulation didn't start with you. He's been doing this for years, carefully, secretly, without anyone noticing. You were just the first to fight back effectively." Sophie's hands tightened around her coffee cup. "What do you mean? He wasn't just trying to evict me. He created a fake brother, lied about family, everything. How could someone go that far?" Margaret's gaze was steady. "People like him thrive on control. He studies people, finds weaknesses, and constructs narratives to exploit them. The fake brother was his way of isolating you, making you doubt your reality, but what he didn't anticipate was your intelligence and resilience." Sophie exhaled slowly, the tension in her chest easing just slightly. "So, this isn't over, there's more." "Yes," Margaret said gently, "and there's a reason I contacted you. Mr. Caldwell isn't just a lone manipulator. He's part of a network, others who study, manipulate, and exploit people. You're now aware of the techniques, and that knowledge makes you dangerous to them. They may try to intimidate you further, or worse, attempt to reclaim their influence through fear." The weight of her words hit Sophie like a cold wave. Fear she had thought buried months ago returned with a vengeance, but this time she met it with clarity. "Then I need to know everything. I need to be prepared." Margaret nodded. "We'll start with his past. Mr. Caldwell has done this before, using the same tactics. Letters, fake relatives, threats, manipulation, all calculated. He even uses DNA testing as a tool of psychological warfare, knowing most people would hesitate to confront it. You are the first person to turn the tables effectively." Sophie's mind raced, but the DNA test already proved he was lying. That should have been enough. It was enough to neutralize him for now, Margaret replied, but you have to understand that these people often have backup plans, contingencies, and sometimes allies in unexpected places. Your vigilance must continue. Sophie absorbed the words, feeling the reality of the situation sink in. Her battle with Mr. Caldwell had been brutal, but it was just one layer of a much larger web. What do I do now? You take control of your life, Margaret said, her voice firm but encouraging. Document everything, trust your instincts, and most importantly, understand that truth is your greatest weapon. Over the following weeks, Sophie fortified her apartment legally, emotionally, and psychologically. She implemented security measures, documented every interaction, and sought support from friends and professionals who could guide her through the aftermath. Even though Mr. Caldwell had been removed, the shadow of his manipulation lingered, like a faint echo in the corners of her mind. Then one evening, a package arrived at her door. There was no return address, only her name written in precise, unfamiliar handwriting. She hesitated but opened it. Inside was a small box containing a USB drive and a handwritten note. The full story is here. What you see is only a fraction of what happened. Decide carefully. Her curiosity battled with caution. Could this be another trap, or was it the final piece of the puzzle? With trembling hands, Sophie plugged the drive into her laptop. The screen lit up, revealing folders labeled with dates, names, and locations, detailed records of Mr. Caldwell's manipulations over the years. There were scanned letters, emails, photographs, and even recordings. Every tactic he had used, every person he had targeted, was meticulously documented. Sophie's breath caught in her throat. The scale of it was staggering. Mr. Caldwell wasn't just a dangerous manipulator, he was a predator studying human behavior, exploiting weaknesses, and leaving chaos in his wake. But amid the overwhelming evidence, Sophie also noticed a strange pattern. Every person he targeted eventually resisted in some way, and every time his control faltered. A sense of purpose ignited in her. This wasn't just about surviving anymore, it was about exposing him completely, ensuring he could never manipulate another person again. She began compiling the information, preparing a comprehensive report to share with authorities, psychologists, and investigative journalists who could shed light on the extent of his operations. Days turned into weeks as Sophie worked tirelessly. She uncovered connections she hadn't anticipated, false identities, shell companies, and even accomplices who had assisted in his manipulations. Each revelation was a shock but also a confirmation. She had been right to fight back, and now she had the power to dismantle the entire network. Then came the final confrontation. Margaret contacted her with a location, an abandoned office building where Mr. Caldwell had been organizing his files and meeting with associates. Sophie hesitated, knowing the risks, but Margaret's words gave her courage. You've exposed the truth. He's vulnerable now. This is your chance to confront him with undeniable proof. Sophie arrived at the building cautiously. Inside, the space was dark and quiet, the air heavy with dust and the faint scent of old paper. At the far end of the room, she saw him, Mr. Caldwell, older, less confident, scanning through files. When he noticed her, his usual calm was replaced by recognition and a flicker of fear. Sophie, he said, voice smooth but strained, I didn't expect you here. I came to end this, Sophie replied, holding up her phone. On the screen were the compiled files, documents, photographs, and recordings, proof of every manipulation, every lie, every victim. All of it, every word, every move. You can't lie your way out this time. He studied her carefully, the room silent except for the faint hum of fluorescent lights. You've grown cleverer than I imagined, he admitted, and relentless. You underestimated me, Sophie said firmly, and now it's over. For the first time, he didn't respond. His carefully constructed facade had crumbled, replaced by the reality that his power was gone. Sophie felt a strange mixture of triumph and relief. Months of fear, manipulation, and uncertainty were finally yielding to control, justice, and truth. Authorities were waiting outside. Margaret had coordinated their presence to ensure Sophie's confrontation was safe and documented. As Mr. Caldwell was led away, Sophie felt an overwhelming sense of closure. She had faced fear, deception, and a man who had tried to rewrite her reality, and she had prevailed. Yet even as she watched him disappear into the police car, the final message from the unknown source lingered in her mind. Not all secrets have been revealed. Sophie knew the journey wasn't entirely over. There were layers yet to uncover, consequences yet to face, and truths yet to shine fully into the light. But for the first time, she felt empowered, ready to face whatever came next with courage, clarity, and unwavering determination. She returned to her apartment, now her sanctuary rather than a battleground. Every letter, every scrawled note, every threatening message had been catalogued and preserved. She had turned fear into evidence, manipulation into understanding, and lies into truth. In the quiet of the night, Sophie finally allowed herself to exhale. The apartment felt different now, lighter, safer, infused with the knowledge that she had reclaimed her life. She reflected on the journey, the terror of eviction, the confusion over a fabricated brother, the relentless manipulation, and the ultimate triumph of truth. And as she looked out the window, city lights twinkling in the distance, she whispered to herself, "No one will control me again, not fear, not lies, not him." The shadows of Mr. Caldwell's influence had faded, replaced by clarity, courage, and resilience. Sophie had survived the unthinkable and in doing so had uncovered a deeper understanding of human behavior, manipulation, and the extraordinary power of standing up for oneself. The story of the fake brother, the DNA test, the manipulation, and the confrontation would linger in her memory forever, a chilling reminder of the lengths some people would go to control others. But it would also serve as a testament to the strength of courage, intelligence, and the refusal to be silenced. In the end, Sophie had not only defended her home, she had reclaimed her life, exposed the truth, and ensured that the man who had tried to control her would never have that power again. And for the first time in months, she felt an overwhelming sense of peace, knowing that she had faced darkness and emerged stronger, wiser, and unbroken. The final twist, however, lingered in the back of her mind. The message had warned her that some secrets remained unrevealed. Sophie realized that vigilance would always be necessary, that the shadows of manipulation could linger even after exposure. But she also knew something crucial: she was no longer the prey, she was the survivor, and the truth was now her weapon. And as the night settled over the city, Sophie closed her eyes, ready to embrace whatever came next, armed with knowledge, resilience, and the unwavering certainty that she would never again be controlled by fear, lies, or deception.